So, dear Dhamma friends, tonight's talk, and I guess also tomorrow's night talk, because I thought I'd be able to do it in just one night, but the previous class revealed to me that it's not quite feasible. We'll have as a topic, will be on karma and rebirth, or Kamma and rebirth. So, you remember that we spoke about the Four Noble Truths? And to really understand the Four Noble Truths in depth, to understand them with their full implications, it's important to view them in the broader picture against which the Buddha's teaching unfolds. And that is actually the doctrine of rebirth and Kamma. So I thought I'd begin by considering that there are maybe 3 possible views, maybe more. At least 3, most prominent views of what happens to us at death or after death. One of these is the one we could call the view of philosophical materialism, which holds that the human person is essentially a combination of material constituents, that the essential factor of our existence is the physical body, which is the product of a large course of biological evolution. The mind, or consciousness, is just a sort of chance byproduct of interaction of material particles. So what that means is that according to this vision, the mind is a product of the physical body. And that implies that when the physical body is no more, the mind or consciousness is no more. Gone, done with. I won't go into the details, but that's the most prominent view. We could call this, sort of scientific view. So, the mind or consciousness is the result of a physical body, brain maybe, other things together. Without this physical body, consciousness is not possible. That's the main view. Okay. Let's add to this that this is a sort of a philosophical position based on science. It's not something that is completely determined and verified by science. It's really just a kind of philosophical interpretation of the discoveries of science. For example, we know that if there is damage to part of the brain, our cognitive abilities, our consciousness is as well, implied in this damage, meaning it doesn't function properly. So from these discoveries, we imply that when the brain is totally damaged, meaning it's gone, dead, consciousness is not possible. But we do not have a scientific, proof of this. It's thus implied by, that's the idea. So, from this one jumps to the assumption that consciousness is just a byproduct of brain or neurological function. But that does not explain something which is the capacity for awareness, on the basis of just a conglomeration of material particles. consciousness is really something radically different. No? The ability that human beings have to be self-conscious. It is really something totally different from a biological function. It's really something really distinct and apart from that. The other position would be the one that we find in mainstream Christianity, for example, that we live one life on earth, and our deeds and our faith in this life will determine our destiny forever in the afterlife. So, if we have certain kind of faith, we do certain kind of deeds, then these aspects of our earthly life will determine the kind of afterlife we will have. Heaven, hell, purgatory for the Catholic Christian Church. And but the important thing is that then it will be forever. One life on earth, then forever a sort of afterlife someplace else. Then we have the third position is that of multiple lives. Not just one, but very many of them, one after the other. So that is the theory or the view of what is called rebirth, or sometimes called reincarnation. And we must make a distinction of these two things. This is the view which is actually the view of the main religions of India, like Hinduism, Buddhism, and the less well-known religion of Jainism. I mean, the belief of reincarnation was also held by other schools, like in ancient Greece, Pythagoras and Plato had this idea, and they were very influential in all the stream of philosophies that came out of them. So it's not just India and the East, also in the West we have this sort of view. Of the three positions, the position that Buddhism adopts is that of multiple lives, not just one life, but multiple lives. But there is a significant difference between the Buddhist teaching of what we call rebirth and the teaching of reincarnation. The difference is that the fundamental idea of the Hindu philosophy is that we possess a single, permanent, everlasting, unchanging self or soul. And that is called the Atman. According to Hindu philosophies, the self is permanent and unchanging. It remains ever the same, but it migrates from body to body, retaining its identity. So it's just, it's like we change clothes, basically, There is this core which is always the same. When the clothes wear out, we take a new set of clothes and we go on living. That's the basic idea. The Buddhist theory or doctrine of rebirth does not involve the belief in a permanent, unchanging self. So we know that the core of the teaching of the Buddha is the doctrine of anatta, meaning non-self or not self. The Buddha teaches that there is no single permanent entity that we can call the self. But what we call the person is always in process, always changing. So the mind or consciousness is a process. A process that's always changing. One moment of consciousness arises, passes away, followed by another moment of consciousness, which arises, performs its function, and then passes away. The mind is this sequence, this succession of occasions of consciousness. So it's an ever-changing process, never remaining, without any kind of substantial entity that remains the same. But what Buddhism teaches is that at death, the process of consciousness does not come to an end. The body ends. The process of consciousness does not end at the moment of death. But rather, this process of consciousness arises on the basis of a physical body, and when this physical body can no longer biologically support the process of consciousness, then the body passes away. The body undergoes death. But consciousness does not come to an end. Rather, the stream of consciousness, the process of consciousness, will then move on and take up another physical organism. It will arise on the basis of a new physical organism, and that is what is called rebirth. It is the arising of the stream of consciousness based on a new physical organism. So that's why in Buddhism we try and avoid the use of the word reincarnation, but we usually use the word rebirth to make this very clear distinction. So in Buddhism there is no permanent, unchanging self, but the core teaching of the Buddha is the teaching of anatta, not self. That's the clear distinction. Instead, in Buddhism, we do not use reincarnation, but the word we use is punabhava. Now, puna means again, and bhava means existence or becoming. So punabhava is literally becoming again and again, or taking on existence again and again. And let's point out that in Buddhism, rebirth is not taken as something to be taken as a sort of romantic, idea or anything like that. Like usually we hear stories like, oh yes, I remember my previous life, and of course I was like either a prince or a princess or a king or someone special or important. We never find those sort of stories actually in Buddhism. Most likely we had been living very ordinary lives. We were born, we grew up, maybe we fell in love, got married, had children, then had problems with the husbands and wives, problems with our children, then we got old, we got ill, and we died. Oh yes, not to mention work. And all the stuff that comes with that, having to go to school, profession, career, all that nonsense. Maybe multiple marriages, divorces, having to pay alimony. Damn. All this sort of stuff, So, that's probably what it was like. not really being an emperor, or maybe we were someone really ordinary, It's just a very ordinary, simple human life with all its tribulations and happiness, of course, but it's that sort of a thing. Nothing special. Nothing special in a way. Let's keep this in mind. Nothing really special about rebirth. So, if we do happen to have these very strange sort of memories, we just treat them as we deal with anything else in meditation. Oh yes, okay. Remembering. Thinking. As I was mentioning in the class before, when we have the interview with the teacher, especially in this Burmese tradition, it might happen that, I was there meditating. Came up to the mind that previous life I was so and so and so. Yeah, right. What's happening with the rising and falling? Tell me about that. What are you feeling right now? It was really important teacher. Yeah. Maybe you didn't study enough if you're here again. Go back to the rising and falling. It's more than enough. That's the gist of it. That's the basic idea. No escape from samsara, except for nibbana. Let's just, keep this in mind in a very light-hearted way. Yeah, right. Go back to the rising and falling. Sitting, walking. Okay. Good enough. But we must say that on ground of scriptural basis, we do find that the Buddha himself taught rebirth. It was part of the teaching. In fact, we find this account of his own enlightenment. He says that when my mind was concentrated, purified, cleansed, unblemished, rid of defilement, malleable, steady, and attained to imperturbability. Very difficult word. Very calm focus. The unified mind, I directed it to the knowledge of the passing away and rebirth of beings. With the divine eye, I saw beings passing away and being reborn, inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunately, and I understood how beings fare on in accordance with their karma. Meaning, I understood how karma or Kamma decides their future rebirths. Beautiful, ugly, rich, poor, fortunate, unfortunately, sick, healthy, that sort of stuff. So, that's the Buddha that says this. So, it's actually, and we find these teachings very many times in the canon, not just once. So we can safely say that it was really part of the teaching of the Buddha and his disciples. It's not some kind of stray passage that maybe somebody else might have inserted in the text just to make it look like a bit more Hindu. No. We find it very many times. So it seems to be part of the fundamental framework of the Buddha's teaching. This continuity of existence is this process by which one life follows another life, and that is followed by another life, and then another life, is what we call in Buddhism samsara. The word samsara comes from the verb samsariti, which means to run along, to roam on, to go on. And so samsara is the running along from birth to death, and then from death to a new birth. According to the Buddha, samsara is without any discoverable beginning. He says that there is no first point that can be found to the cycle of birth and death. We can even see it, from... Since it is a cycle, you cannot find in a cycle a beginning. It's not from point A to point B, but since a cycle, you cannot really discern when was the beginning, where was the end. That's the idea. By the way, these streams of consciousness are individual and continue on from life to life. But these streams of consciousness, as I said, are always changing, arising and passing away from moment to moment. So that means that this process, doesn't just happen from one life to another life, but it's actually always going on from one moment to the next moment, according to karma. And that is really, really important in the practice, because we are responsible for the next moment. Because how we interact with the present moment gives rise to the quality of the next moment. Usually the kind of relationship we have with whatever is present right now is either attachment or aversion. And out of attachment or aversion, there comes about a certain kind of karma. Because we are not mindful usually, it's just habit. That's a habit, it's... And to be more specific, more precise, according to the Buddha's teaching, underneath this rebirth process, there is a particular causal structure. And that structure has 3 stages or 3 aspects. Number 1, the defilements. Certain unwholesome qualities of mind, particularly usually we speak of greed, hatred, and delusion as being the 3 main defilements. Number 2, out of those defilements, we engage in various activities. We act out of greed, anger, and delusion. So we act out of those, roots. 3, those activities create karma. And this karma, together with the defilements, are the fundamental causes for rebirth. And the particular form in which rebirth takes place. So we can see that there is this twin topic that goes along with rebirth, and it is karma. Karma is a word which has been absorbed into everyday English usage. Oh, it's your karma. Usually when we say that, it's meant like, it's a bit of a misunderstanding, like that's your destiny, or, But actually the Buddha gives a very precise and psychological, ethical definition of karma. The Buddha says, it is volition that I call karma. Now the word volition is not used nowadays very often. Maybe we could use intention. So it's the intentional activity of the mind that creates karma. Intentional. There is an intention. So the decisive factor in action is the intention, the volition, the motivation. And it's the motivation that can express itself in bodily action, in speech, and even simply in thoughts. The Buddha distinguishes karma according to its intention, according to the motivation. And he distinguishes two broad classes, which we call in Pali kusala and akusala. Edifying or not edifying. Wholesome or unwholesome, basically. So, I would say that maybe for tonight's talk this could be enough. So, it's really important to bear in mind that there is this cycle of rebirths. It's not just from one life to another life. We have no idea whether that actually happens. But certainly from one moment to the next. We are reborn each moment, and we create our own destiny in a way. And there is an underlying structure to this kammic activity, which has three main components. Number one, the defilements, greed, anger, and delusion. Usually we act out of those roots. And number three, there is a kammic result of those actions which begin with intention. So there is thought, speech, action. So even just thinking is intention and creates a certain result. So beware what you think about. Because it can be powerful. Now, seeing the bright side of this, and that's why the meditation practice is so important. I mean, the development of mindfulness. It's like, instead of the usual attachment or aversion, thanks to the practice, mindfulness comes up. And then we can actually decide whether we are about to do is kusala or akusala. And we can decide to drop the akusala action or intention, or go on if it is kusala. It's great. Just do it. And do it again. And do it again. So that's a good action actually. So just keep in mind these things. It just not just rebirth is not just one life to the other, but one moment to the next. And we are actually creating the next moment through intention. And this intention usually is not so mindful. But through the practice of meditation, we can become more and more aware of the possible actions, speech, thought, that sort of a thing. And that's just about it for tonight. Now, are there any questions? Yeah, I thought there may be one or two. Please.
Sometimes I have thoughts, especially in the meditation, I don't know where they come. Not often, but sometimes they are really cruel.
Mm-hmm.
So this is also an intention?
No.
Okay.
No. You're safe. You're safe. because those are unintentional.
Okay.
Mm. If you were to, okay, let's give an example. Somebody is rude to me. A thought comes up in the mind. Yeah, right. I will show you now. And then I punch him in the face. So there is an intention in the mind, which is bad enough, and then I follow on that intention, and there is an action which is harmful. But that is intentional. Now, if, for example, during the walking meditation, I squash a few million ants during the course of the retreat, but it is not intentional. According to the Buddha, that doesn't produce any Kamma, because there is no intention to harm the ants. That's what makes the difference. So we may have all these very strange thoughts in the mind, but we don't follow them, we just don't act upon them. Say, oh, came up in the mind, unwholesome. No follow through. So that's one of the distinctions that the Buddha introduced, In Jainism we don't find this distinction, this. Whether it's intentional or not intentional, it creates Kamma. Buddhism is a bit more humanitarian, in our view. It's like, oh, no, it's intention which I call Kamma, said the Buddha. So that's it. Any other questions? Is that clear enough?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, please.
The Buddha says, don't believe anything which you didn't experience by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Then the question up regarding rebirth, not only in this life, but other life. It's not in my experience. I didn't saw things like this.
So, I mean, the teaching of the Buddha is not that you have to believe in a next life or anything. He was just reporting what he saw. That was the idea, But he doesn't really tell you, if you want to become a follower of the Buddha, you have to believe in rebirth. No, that's not the teaching at all. You just practice and see for yourself whether you find it true in your life, that your own actions do give a result.
That's something different.
Yeah, that's something total. That's the teaching, It's like, see whether it is true for yourself in your own life, whether you follow upon certain actions, what are the results? And you follow upon other actions, what are the results? And then you decide which is more worthwhile, to follow through, possibly. That's the idea. So, but it was not a request of believing in rebirth. It was just reporting, this is what I saw after my own enlightenment. But it's never a request of belief. It's not like, I mean, it's always a big experiment. You try it out, and see for yourself, and that's about it. Is that clear? Clear enough. Okay. Anything else? Good. Then I guess the I can thank you for your presence and listening heart. And I will see you at 9 o'clock for the metta practice. Thank you very much.